Any questions? Anybody have any questions?
Keith, anything else after that in your life? How was it changed?
Well, I do have one other thing I remember, that when I said thank you, God, and it's hurt so much, but I said it. About a week after he was killed, people didn't give flowers, which is neat. People brought over some money, because I was a salesman. I wasn't the best salesman. And I had a bad week, I remember. People, they gave us some money instead of flowers, because we had them cremated. And we took him up to Brio Canyon, the Sandia Mountains in Albuquerque, because that's where he and all his buddies partied. And a bunch of his party buddies went up there with us. There was about 10 of us traipsing up through this ravine guller type of thing. And I remember my daughter Carrie. She's got 2 kids now, and she's trying out to be a firefighter. And my son Brian, my other son Brad, he was like leading the group, because he knew where the spot was. And after all these years, right now he's at Mount St. Mary's in Maryland, studying to be a priest. He realized God was real too. He's accepted that. He's real happy too. He's be a priest in a year and a half. He wants to tell other people that God's real. Because I'm not a speaker. I'm not a talker. This is not. It's not me. Remember going up that canyon. Carrie, my daughter, had his ashes on his back. His little red backpack. And I remember keeping his ashes out in the garage, because I didn't know where to keep them the night before we took him up there. And never had anybody cremated before. Didn't know death. We were going up that ravine, and we finally got up to the party place. And this one kid, his name was David, he was his best buddy, and he got up there and he got a rock. And he's pounding on this tree, pounding on this big, giant pine tree, just pounding. And I didn't say anything. I just let him do his thing. And what he's doing, he's knocking the bark off. And he wrote Brian's name in the tree. So I can always go up there and find that tree and find out where it is. It's a pretty hard trek. I don't know if I want to go up there anymore, but I hadn't been up there for years. But remember Brian and Brad and Carrie and myself, and Brian too, come to think of it, went up to the wash and opened that box with the ashes in it. And I couldn't get it open. It was real thick plastic. And finally I got it open, and I went to spread the ashes. And they weren't ashes. They were bones. They were thick. It was not ashes. It wasn't like in the movies. And I remember spreading out the ashes and the bones, and it was in like a riverbed, and Brian and Carrie and I, we all took our feet and tried to mess out and people wanted to come up there. We wouldn't let them come up there, because we didn't want them to see his bones. And I remember getting down on my hands and knees and saying, thank you, God, again. Well, came back down the mountain. We had that money I was telling you about that people left. We decided we were going to leave town. And I thought we'd go down to Las Cruces, New Mexico. I had some people I might be able to sell some insurance to, but I didn't sell any insurance. And Carrie, who was 9 at the time, said that she had this big water toy. And it was pretty good size. And she wanted to take that with her, because there'd be maybe a pool at the Motel 6 where we were going. And she asked me to let the air out. Well, when I let the thing out of the water toy, I started pressing the air out, and I realized that Brian blew it up. Every time I pressed that air out, his wind, his breath would blow back at me, and I'd say, "Thank you, God." And that was a pretty rough week down there. Like I said, didn't sell any insurance, tried, but just wasn't in the mood. But that attitude of gratitude, that "thank you, God," try it. It works. It's gets you closer to God. Anything else? Any other questions? Anybody have a clarification or anything I said or anything?
Yeah, I have a clarification.
What?
What were the circumstances of it being shot?
Okay. It was about 7 o'clock in the evening. They said they were partying, and they were all drinking and smoking, having a good time. There's probably, I don't know how many kids were there, but they were having a pretty good time. And this kid Bob, he was always sort of wasn't really in the group. He was sort of a outsider type of thing, but always he's sort of like a wannabe type of the guy. And Brian was sort of he was pretty much of a leader. People were always over at our house partying. Our house was a party house. It was a fun place to be at. Still, as a matter of fact. And Bob pulled out this little .25 caliber silver-plated gun, little tiny thing, and told everybody he was going to kill himself that night. And they said that Brian took him over on the side and was talking to him for a long time and talked him out of it. Well, at midnight, evidently, this kid decided that was the bewitching hour, the 4th of July, that he was going to really do it. And they were in the hallway, evidently, back there. And Brian was talking to Bob, and Bob had the gun in his hand, and they were talking. And Brian was a good athlete. He could throw a baseball so hard that most people couldn't catch it, inaccurate. He could put a stack of quarters on his elbow and flip his elbow and catch the quarters in midair. And so he had good reflexes. Maybe he had too good of reflexes, I thought about later. And the boy, Bob was 16 too. The kid put the gun up underneath his throat, started to pull the trigger, and Brian grabbed the gun and went off and hit Brian in the head. And that's when I got the call. You heard what happened after that. Anything else? Any other questions?
And what happened to Bob then?
I heard he, right after that, I saw him, they wanted to get him for murder 1. But I told him that he didn't mean to do it. I didn't feel he did.